have all the committee members here and folks over there listening and online listening. Just a few things. We're going to introduce ourselves and then we'll do bill requests, or sorry, we have a new name, request for committee-sponsored bill drafts for introduction. That's kind of the new way we're phrasing that. And then we'll talk about a few other things after that. Interestingly, we have a lot of people on this committee that are new to the Judiciary Committee. There's very few of us that are actually alumni of the Judiciary. I think there's 6 of us that have been on the committee before. So it's going to be new for a lot of people. So I just want to encourage you to ask questions and feel free to not get, it's okay to get a little frustrated if we argue about where the comma goes in a statute, because that's what we do sometimes in this committee. But I hope you'll love it. I hope we can make it interesting. People either love it or hate it, I think, but on the Judiciary Committee, and my goal is that you'll love it this time. So we also have a lot of folks that are new to the legislature that are freshmen. So we will go ahead, we'll have introductions. I am going to admit, and maybe Representative Carmichael or Schreiber, I don't know, y'all can correct me, but I think this will be the first House Judiciary Committee where women outnumber men.
It is the first in my recollection, which almost undoubtedly means it would be the first. However, I would defer to Mr. Thompson, who is the senior member, if you will, of the committee in the room, and he knows far better than I.
He suspects that we're right. So it's just an interesting note. So, okay. What I wanted to ask, I'm going to ask everyone a question. I'd love you to introduce yourself. We're not in a huge hurry, but just name, where you're from, and then I'm going to ask a question. What I wanted to ask was, what do you think about the Oxford comma? But I'm not going to ask that because I wouldn't have known a while ago what that was either. But I have a definite opinion, but I won't let my opinion know what it is. So, but the question is, please tell us some legal, it can be a movie, a series, a play, just it can even be a book that you either relate to or some legal entertainment piece that you have really enjoyed, that you've learned something from, just that you would like to promote, that you like to tell us about why you like it, or even how it fits you a little bit. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to start with the representative from Topeka, Representative Bourgeon.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Jesse Bourgeon, I represent the 52nd House District, which is here in Topeka, the southwest, western part of Topeka. This is starting my 3rd term and 2nd time to be on House Judiciary, so I'm excited to be back and working with our chairwoman and ranking member. Interesting question. I don't watch a lot of, it probably has to, I remember as a kid watching the People's Court. It's like the old one. Remember Judge Wapner? Yeah, I don't know. It would have to be an entertainment factor. I'm not an attorney, I'm a small business owner. So anyway, look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
And I'll just say, I know Representative Barth did have something else today. I'm not sure where Representative Lewis is, but they're not getting out of this. So they will have to answer the question when they come back. So.
Hello, everybody. I'm Pam Curtis, and I'm a representative from Kansas City, Kansas. My district is the downtown Kansas City, Kansas area, so has a lot of the historic neighborhoods that people are familiar with, such as Strawberry Hill. And I am struggling. I am glad I was trying to think of something serious, like in the way of, so I'm glad Jesse didn't really go that way, so it kind of gave me an out. Judge Judy. Like, my grandpa lived with us for 5 years, and every day he would go watch Judge Judy, and he thought that was the real thing. And unfortunately, he and his second wife got a divorce. And they thought that they were both going to go to court and be able to do the Judge Judy thing and slug it out. And it didn't happen that way at all. So anyway, that's my legal story.
Jill Ward, House District 105, Northwest Wichita. And I think I'm going to say a few good men, probably because I like the assertiveness.
Mark Schreiber, District 60, which is primarily Emporia and Northwest Lyon County. I would say Just Mercy is a book by Brian Stevenson. And other than that, glad to be here. Look forward to all the action that's going to be happening. Thanks.
Charlotte Esau, District 14, which is Northwest Olathe. If you drive K-10 from Lawrence to Kansas City, you drive right by my district on the south side. So I have absolutely no idea. So I don't know. I've watched Perry Mason a long, long time ago.
Yes, perfect.
Can't remember how many years ago. So I'm new to the committee. I've served 4 years, took a couple years off, and I'm back and enjoyed it. But that's as far as I can tell you on legal.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Osman. I'm representative for District 48. That's in Overland Park in Johnson County. This is my third term in the legislature and second in Judiciary. So first of all, I would say I'm a strong proponent of the Oxford comma. Absolutely. It is necessary, and in fact, my understanding is that the failure of an Oxford comma actually changed a legal dispute on labor relations on overtime rules. So yeah, it has legal repercussions as well. As far as my media preferences, I suppose, I think I would say, I don't know, a couple different ones. 12 Angry Men is one that I loved, and also My Cousin Vinny. I think both of those fantastic movies.
I am Representative Laura Williams. This is my first year serving on Judiciary, and I represent parts of Lenexa and Olathe, so the northern parts of, if you're driving on K-10, I'm on the northern side. And, you know, as I was thinking about this question, I don't know if anyone has seen Jury Duty, but it's a pretty good one where there is one member who thinks that he is a part, that jury duty is real, and everyone else is an actor and actress. And they go through the whole court. And at one point in time, they think that they're going to get made, and they never do. It's very good. Slightly inappropriate, but it's a series. Jury Duty. It's pretty funny. Amazon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Representative Lindsay Vaughn. I serve the 22nd District, which is in northern Overland Park in Johnson County. And this is my third term, my second on this committee. It's one of my favorites. I think we all do a really good job working together, and I enjoy it a lot. For my favorite movie, I'm surprised no one has said it, but the first one that came to mind was Legally Blonde. That's definitely a favorite. Yes. But I think probably my favorite legal movie is Erin Brockovich.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. Lauren Bohai for Olathe and House District 15. I would say my favorite, it's kind of tied because I really enjoy Suits on USA, which is now coming to, I don't know, some other station. And then I also enjoyed Lincoln Lawyer. And way back in high school, I enjoyed reading all the John Grisham books, right? So that's, I don't know, I can't really pick one. So, yeah.
You have lots of experience, you know, to be on the Judiciary Committee.
We'll take it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of you may know that practicing lawyers are oftentimes paid by the hour, and you will understand why it takes me 3 times as long to say something as could be said in 1/3 the words. I have a very bad habit about that. The chair is very familiar with where her gavel is located, and I understand that. It offends me not. Let me say I'm the state representative for the 92nd District of Kansas. That's in Wichita, the area immediately west of downtown Wichita. I've been on this committee for 12 years, so Ms. Scott and Mr. Thompson both hold seniority over me here. I served as the ranking member for, I think, 9, 10 years, something like that. The Oxford comma is a topic of great interest to me because in 2015, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee used the Oxford comma in a way that caused me hours of wasted time. And Mr. Thompson, had I inquired of him earlier, could have saved me all of that time. I am a big supporter of the Oxford comma, but it is my hope that it will not be publicly explained as a part of an initiation so that others can spend as much effort as I do to know exactly how the Oxford comma is used in legislative drafting. It has a very valuable and particular purpose, and it's fun to watch people learn it. I agree with my colleague that Perry Mason is indeed one of the finest series ever made. My grandfather was the clerk of the district court in a small county in southeastern Oklahoma for nigh on 50 years. He was a Democrat. One Republican filed against him once and was never seen again. But when I was a little boy, I watched Perry Mason faithfully, and then I would sit in Grandpa's court and watch the trials. A small bit of trivia that you might want to file away somewhere is, you will recall that in Perry Mason's episode number 1, something called leading questions were used frequently. And number 2, the person who done it always jumped up and confessed that I did it. Now, the use of those leading questions would not be permitted in a jury trial in the circumstances used there, but this was during what were called preliminary hearings. And so that's how it was that Hamilton Berger, the district attorney, and Perry Mason were able to get away with breaches of the rules. So you can file that away. I do want to comment quickly on a few good men. I understand that the representative from Wichita found that interesting. I want you to know that former commander and state representative Jerry Stodgill attempted to wear his Navy dress whites today for the state of the military, but sadly found that they no longer fit. And he did not wear his commander's hat and cauliflower because he wanted to be in either full uniform or no uniform at all. Now, let's see. I had something else on my list, but I think we've probably covered it, Madam Chair. I look forward to continuing the good work of this committee. Thank you. Oh, forgot to say, I practiced law in 41 years, law in Wichita, 41 years, generally a civil practice of the law for both plaintiffs and defendants, and eventually also did a lot of administrative law and served as an administrative law judge for 15 or 16 years. And I retired from the practice of the law just about a year and a half ago. It is a wonderful occupation and a wonderful education. And I hope that those of you who are not members of the bar will look to this experience as perhaps an incentive to think about going to law school. There have been people from this legislature who have served here and completed their full law school education at Washburn, so it can be done. Thank you.
Hello, Brad Barrett. I'll new representative for the 76th district. That's all of Coffee, bottom half of Osage, rural parts on the east side of Lyon County. I would say suits. I hate to steal that, but that was before getting into law enforcement, and then before, especially working as an investigator in the prosecutor's office. Now I can't stand any kind of movies like that. But yeah, thank you.
I'm Angela Martinez, and I represent District 103 in Wichita. My favorite movie is A Time to Kill with Matthew McConaughey? Yeah, that was a really good movie for me. So I really enjoyed that. And then I also enjoy this series. I don't know what it is. I don't know the name of it. I catch it every now and then. I can't watch it all the time because I don't have that kind of time. And I don't really like reality shows, but it's the one where you go into jail and you're really not a convict. You just go in there for the experience and you can tap out anytime you want. But yeah, 60 days in, yeah, I kind of like that one. But it's kind of getting ridiculous. But I thought it was kind of interesting to go in and put yourself in that situation.
My name is Kyler Sweely. I'm a freshman and I serve Hutchinson. So I have the southern half of Hutch. It's kind of split in 50-50, and the northern half is Paul Wagner. This is obviously the bad part about going last, as everyone said my things that I was going to say. So I was obviously going to say that I'm very well versed in law because I've seen every episode of Suits, and then Lincoln Lawyer, not the TV show one, but the one with McConaughey. But obviously somebody said the exact same thing, so I'll just rest.
Okay, staff, we're gonna let the staff go. We're starting with Jason. You're the rank. You're the person here. You're the no.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. Jason Thompson, Office of Reviser of Statutes. This is my 19th session. That's why everybody keeps calling me old. Experienced. Most of those on corrections, judiciary on either the Senate or House side or both. Most of the recent years were on the Senate side, so happy to be back on the House side. Strong opinions about the Oxford comma. I use them in my personal writing. I'm not allowed to use them in my drafting. My editor removes them all the time. So I'm used to not using them in statutes, but I prefer them in my personal writing. And favorite legal thing, I was thinking of a couple CLEs we've done where they used Lincoln Lawyer and My Cousin Vinny, and I really enjoyed that, so we'll go with those.
Good afternoon, committee. Natalie Scott, also from the Office of Reviser of Statutes. This is my 13th session. I think about 10 or 11 of those have been on judiciary or corrections in some form. The last several years, I've been staffing House corrections and judiciary, but I've been sent off to pasture to the Senate side, so I'll be spending most of my time over there this session. Also, big fan of the Oxford comma. Since we don't use it in our drafting, I typically get around that by using some lists. I feel like that's kind of our solution to not being able to use the Oxford comma. And in terms of TV shows, legal TV shows, I don't want you to think I personally relate to this person, but I really like the show Better Call Saul. Bit of a sketchy criminal defense attorney, but entertaining nonetheless.
Hello. Hello, my name is Cole Hill. I'm part of the AV tech team, and I don't have as many exciting movies, but I'm a big fan of the Space Jam with Michael Jordan in it. Big fan of that one in particular.
Is your first name Cole?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Okay, just want to make sure I knew. Thank you.
My name is Mike Ditch with Legislative Research. Second session and second time serving on this committee, so looking forward to it. My favorite legal movie or book is probably John Adams Under Fire. I read it over the summer. Talks about his involvement in the Boston Massacre trials. Kind of related to me because he felt everyone deserved quality representation in a court of law. And they also put in some cool nuggets about how the law evolved in the colonies.
I'm Natalie Nelson from Legislative Research. This is my 11th session and my, I think, 6th or 7th session with House Judiciary. I also staff Senate Judiciary. In terms of legal, it's kind of on a limb, but a little bit of a stretch, but Liar Liar from 1997 or so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. This is my 9th session that I'm starting this year. And I believe I've been on corrections or judiciary every year except for maybe one of them. But I'm also on House corrections this year as well. And by me mentioning this book, it's not an endorsement of any of the views expressed within the book. But my favorite John Grisham novel I think I've read is called The Confession, and it explores a death penalty appellate case. And so I'll go ahead and pass it on to Lene.
I'm Lene Hosek. I am a first-year committee assistant, so thank you for your grace and your patience ahead of going to need a lot of that. I am a university teacher of academic English to international students, so I will defer. Luckily, I teach speaking. My specialty is speaking and presenting, and so I don't have to deal with the Oxford comma, and I am always very happy about that. Oh, come on, nobody said the new TV show Matlock. So hilarious. Okay, you just got to have some wind down time sometimes, you know? Yeah.
Thank you. So appreciate the staff, especially, and everyone. All I'm Susan Humphreys and represent East Wichita, Far East Wichita, and Andover. And I actually I was trying to decide what to say. This week, I'm kind of relating to Legally Blonde, to be perfectly honest. I lost my first pen before I ever put it on. And then I had to go back to the speaker's office and say, I need another pen. I don't know what I did with mine. This week has been a little bit like that, just busy, busy. I also would like to relate to The Good Wife, which I think was a good legal show back. But what I'm going to say is earlier this month, I read a book called The Calamity of Souls by Baldacci, and it's about a trial in it's in Virginia in the late 60s, and it's a little bit like To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was just really good, and the setting and just understanding what was going on racially in Virginia in the 60s, and it was quite inspiring too. So, okay, thank you everybody. It's good, and we will have our other folks go through this when they get back to. The first thing we're going to do every day, our first agenda item is going to be our request for committee-sponsored bill drafts for introduction. First of all, committee, do you have any requests? Anybody on the committee have a request? Okay, do we have any request from anyone? Interesting, I thought we had a couple. Nobody? Really? Okay, I was thinking we were going to have a few requests, so okay, no RS numbers yet. The next thing on the agenda is the review of the committee rules. Those are not finalized yet as far as what we're going to be doing with that. So at the moment, we're just operating with the rules that we've had in the past. You're on other committees and you've gone over any committee rules that would be similar to those. By Tuesday, we will have a new set of committee rules, but nothing is going to be very different than what we've had before. We just don't have them printed out yet. Any questions about any of that? Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to call on Jason Thompson to give us a Coma Cora overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon again, committee. Jason Thompson, Office of Revisor of Statutes. What you should have is the now standard memo from the Office of Revisor of Statutes about the Kansas Open Meetings Act and the Kansas Open Records Act. In the next couple of weeks, you'll probably hear this presentation from one person from our office a few times. Very briefly, we'll go over COMA first, the Open Meetings Act. That act applies to legislative administrative bodies and agencies of the state. Specifically, it applies to your legislature, your committees, your subcommittees, unless you have an exemption under the House or Senate rules, and I'll call out the footnote that gives you those rules that say the House and Senate caucus are maybe closed. So your caucus meetings are an exception to the Open Meetings Act. But otherwise, this meeting, other meetings of this committee and your subcommittees are open meetings under the Act. So because you're subject to the Act, what does COMA require? Many of you know this, but the main thing is that meetings must be open to the public. That means access to the meeting is available. It also requires notice of meetings be provided if requested. Now, as many of you know, and observers of the legislature know, the best practice here in the building is to go above and beyond the COMA requirements. So you don't even necessarily have to request notice. It's just sent out to a lot of folks. It's posted lots of places. That's not required by COMA. It is a best practice. It earns you goodwill, and it's definitely something we encourage. So for legislative meetings, frequently the notice is delegated to the committee assistant. So Lene will be handling, providing notices to the individuals who requested it and also posting it and going kind of above and beyond what COMA requires. And certain cases, legislative research steps in and helps with that, especially as we get later in the session. Or before we actually started. They did that for the first week. So that's why you see those notices. Turning then to what is a meeting? What does a meeting mean? There are a number of bullet points there on the second page that define meeting. It's a gathering or assembly via any method of interactive communication, which includes electronic communication, or that occurs at any location or social situation involving a majority of the voting members. That's kind of the critical part, majority of the voting members, for the purpose of engaging in a discussion about the business of the body. Okay, so multi-part definition. Lawyers, that's what we do, right? We're going to break it down into multiple parts. So when you are having a gathering of a majority of members and you start talking about engaging in discussion about the business of the body, how you might vote, what you're going to hear, you need to have that tingle in the back of your head that says we should stop. And I think for the most part, everyone here is very good about that, but that's what you need to be looking for. Anytime you have a majority of you together, just be aware of what you're talking about and stay away from the business of the committee, and everything is fine. The other thing we caution about is serial communications, which is there in the next paragraph on page 2. These are meetings that include any form of interactive communication in a series, and it's got to collectively involve a majority, so still a majority of you. It has to share a common topic of discussion concerning the business or affairs of this body, and it has to be intended by at least one participant, and sometimes more, to reach agreement on some matter that would require action. So, for example, don't send out an email to the majority of the body saying, "How are you going to vote on this bill?" Don't do that, please. And I don't think you will, but we're not trying to have a meeting via serial communication where everybody kind of chimes in and you end up with this string of communications that ends up with a majority of you making a decision about something that's going to happen in this body without having that done publicly. So a couple of other COMA examples that are listed in the bottom that are sort of not meetings that we like to remind you of: social events or travel. So as long as you're together, not talking about the business of the committee, those aren't open meetings. You don't have to worry about that. Be aware of potential appearances of violations, right? So don't start talking about things that are before the body. Social media and email interactions, don't hit reply all. That's basically what that part of the memo says. If you can avoid that, it helps a lot. And then informal discussions before and after committee, keep an eye on those. We do as well, just to kind of keep too many of you from gathering and talking about what you just did or who's going to bring some amendment, right? Just keep it to small groups, not a majority of the body, and everybody will be happy. The last thing I'll say about COMA, and I mentioned this before, was the best practices. The best practice is to note changes to the agenda, to give extra access to the public via the WebEx feed or the YouTube stream, right? Those aren't required by COMA, so sometimes they go down, and we advise the chair, you can go on. It is still an open meeting. You can walk into the building, you can walk into the room, you have access. But in terms of transparency and openness and what the legislature prefers, those are all excellent tools, and you do a great job of making your open meetings even more open than the law requires. So. Moving then to, I should say one last thing about notice. The main thing about notice is the reasonable manner and timing under the circumstances. And as you'll learn being in this building for very long at all, that can be a little different in the legislative time standard than, say, a city commission or a sanitation board, right, that meets irregularly or meets once a month or something. Things here move fast, so notice can be done on the floor via the microphones, or it can be done just by posting outside the door of the committee room. There are many ways you can do it, and that's what we encourage you to do because that, under the circumstances, would likely be reasonable and meet your requirements. So just kind of keep that in mind. It may not always be the chair posting an agenda a week beforehand and sticking to that agenda. Things change, things happen fast, and that's allowed and permissible under the law. So then moving very briefly to CORA, the Open Records Act. This is our statutory act that requires public records of a public agency to be open for inspection. This one doesn't apply to committees, or doesn't come up in committees very often because you are so actively open and transparent about sharing everything that you receive with the public in various ways. But it could happen that someone makes a formal Cora request to Lene or the chair or someone. And if that does happen, or even to one of you, if that does happen, please contact me or someone in my office. The reviser himself, Gordon self, will be happy to help answer that. There are specific requirements. We have 3 days to respond. You have to tell them what you're going to do to produce the records, right? So there are things that are triggered by that formal request. But most of the things you're going to see are not formal requests for an Open Records Act, right? They're more, this testimony was given, how do I find it? Or can you give it to me, right? And if it was provided to the committee, you should give it to them. It is a public record if it was provided to a majority of you. So that's the last thing I'll say about the Open Records Act. What we're looking for when we're advising somebody about whether something the committee is looking at as an open record or not is who got it. So if Representative Carmichael brought this up in another committee and it was brought up to me as a reminder to maybe mention to this body, if the chair provides something to the majority of the committee, right, say just the members of her caucus, which would be a majority of the committee, that then is a committee document. We will need to give that to anyone who requests it because it's been provided to a majority of the committee. So just keep that in mind. Same goes for emails. If you happen to hit reply all to the committee and say something, that's probably a public record, right? You've now provided it to the whole committee. So just be careful with what you say in those things. The last thing I will say, and I know this was also brought up in the committee that I watched, that Representative Carmichael brought up. You prepared me well. I appreciate it. I do my homework. That's one thing I try to do. I try to do my homework. When you have those bill requests and somebody comes up and says, I would like to ask for RS, 1234. Our view is that's not a public record at that point. It's a number, okay? We're still working on that draft. It may be a paragraph. It may be 20 pages that just need a tweak. We won't say, because we still hold that in confidence. We treat it as attorney-client and also work product. And until the chair turns that in, we're not gonna hand it over. And we don't tend to have very many problems with that, but we get a lot of calls asking, when can I see it? And our answer almost always is when the chair says it's ready to be turned in. That's our typical answer. So keep that in mind. That is one kind of exception to the it's been provided to the committee because all you've been given is a number. Now, if somebody hands out the actual draft, which I tend to not encourage them to do, well, then it's out of my hands, right? Then it's a committee document, right? So I think that's it. And I'll be happy to, the very last thing in the memo, I should just note for you, there are civil penalties and usually training requirements. If you do happen to make a violation and the Attorney General happens to come knocking on your door, there were a couple high profile cases with local governing bodies that had COMA or CORA violations. So just keep that in mind. The legislature generally does not get into issues with this, and we'd like to keep it that way. So we're going to help you to the best of our ability.
Okay, committee, what questions do we have? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions for you, Mr. Thompson. And, the only thing is worse than a practicing lawyer is a retired lawyer who now gets a chance to go back to his profession. A couple of points, though, that I did wonder about. One has to do with RS drafts, okay? Oftentimes, I may ask you or your colleagues to draft legislation for me, but I'm not expert in the area. And so I want to take your work product and I want to give it to somebody who is an expert in the field because they can do a better job than I can and maybe even you. And as I understand it, to the extent it's a privileged document, I'm probably the holder of the privilege, and I think I can therefore go to Mr. Klump, for example, who has vast experience, and say, Ed, would you please look at this and see if I've screwed anything up? And he's always helpful enough to point out my error. But I think that that's permissible, and I'm not sure that you really want to discourage us from sometimes doing things like that. Could you help me with the legal concept, but also the preferences of the reviser? Because I want to make your job easy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for the question. So we're skewing away a little bit from COMA and CORA, right, into more of the drafting and the attorney-client and the work product, which is kind of an interesting discussion that we have internally, and I'll defer to Gordon for the ultimate answer because we run all these questions through him. But I can tell you how I operate is how you described. And for all of your benefit, when you contact a revisor for a bill draft, we will treat that with the utmost confidentiality. We will treat it as an attorney-client relationship. We will not discuss that bill draft with anyone else unless you tell us to. So I will not turn it over to Ed Klump or the chairperson or anyone outside my office without your permission, because you are the client and it is your product that I'm creating. So that's where we start. After you give it to Ed, if Ed starts doing things with it, I can't control that, right? You as the client have done something and it's out of my
I've
hands.
arguably waived any privilege that I might have with respect to the document by that disclosure.
At least with that document, I would certainly not be willing to turn over further drafts, for example, right? I would still try to protect the rest of my work product, right? Ongoing revisions and such. So there's nuance that we would try to keep protecting new things. But I think it's a very interesting legal question. It doesn't come up very often, but every now and then we get these interesting open records requests that are asking for items that are kind of related to the file of a bill draft, but we consider work product or attorney-client. And so far, we've been successful in not turning those over for a later open records request directed at our office. So that's kind of where we get back to open records, right? If it wasn't provided to the committee and it wasn't ever revealed to the public, it was an internal document, we consider it protected and privileged forever, just like your files as a practicing lawyer. You know, you wouldn't turn those over even after the client is, you know, not your client anymore.
Madam Chair, with your leave, I'd like to just follow up before I get to my second
Okay.
question. One thing is, I think there is a core exception, if I'm thinking correctly, about drafts of documents, drafts, reports, et
There are a
cetera. And
couple-
I think your drafts might fall within that, but I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but just that's floating around. Is there?
You're not putting me on the spot. That is one of the exceptions in KSA 45-221, and we always cite that too, that it's discretionary. And so we also use the stronger, we're not allowed to on top of that, if that makes sense, right? It's not just our discretion, we also have an ethical obligation.
I don't want to disregard the advice of my lawyers, okay? And I don't want to put your people on the spot. But it really is important, at least in my work here, to take your draft and give it to somebody who is an expert, because as a result, we get back comments that we may incorporate into the final draft of the legislation. And I hope you're not discouraging me to do that, because otherwise both of us take the fault for what we missed. On the other hand, taking your drafts and running them off and just passing them out to every member of the audience, I think is what you would discourage.
Madam Chair, Representative, yes, that was my initial comment about the RS drafts. When you come and ask for it in committee, any of you that are asking for an RS draft in committee, please don't hand it out. I mean, ask. If you really feel there's a need, we can talk about it, but don't do that. And I would encourage the conferees that are asking for bills to do the same. If it's still a work in progress, there's no need to make that a public document before it's ready for prime time. It can cause a lot of problems, right? But at the same time, I will never discourage my client from turning it over to anyone they think would be helpful, because I'm a generalist, not a, you know, I don't practice in these specific areas of law, and I do need that expertise. And I agree, it does make the work product better. And so I count on you to handle those relationships, keep the documents in a group of people you consider trustworthy, so that they don't get beyond where you want them to be. But other than that, as always, I advise and I stand aside, right? That's my role.
You do an excellent job of it. Madam Chair, my second question, hopefully much quicker question, has to do with who is custodian of the documents for the committee. You made reference to the circumstance, and it has happened. I've seen it with other representatives who have received KORA requests for a committee document, if you will. And Mr. Self has always been very prompt in maintaining the privileges and exceptions of the legislature. But as I understand it, my files and records as a legislator, arguably including copies of things that may have been distributed by the committee, are in fact exempt from KORA. However, the custodian of the committee's records may well fall under KORA. And hence, it seems to me that the better practice has always been, if you receive a formal request, number one, you call Gordon Self immediately. You don't wait until the fourth day.
Yes.
But number two, you typically refer people to the committee secretary for copies of committee documents unless you just particularly want to give them something, but you're not, as I understand it, I'm not under an obligation to give my email, my working papers, the documents that I have obtained in the process of my work to anybody unless I want to. Now, do I misinterpret that? Because I don't want people to go around shopping around and coming to me as if I'm the custodian of the committee's records, because I'm not.
Madam Chair and Representative, you raised 2 points that I kind of skipped over but are covered in the memo. One, down in the records required to be disclosed, there is a sentence that our memo includes. It says, public records do not include records made, maintained, or kept by members of the Kansas Legislature. So your personal records are not what we're talking about. However, the committee records are what you sometimes will get asked for. And at that point, you have a couple options. If it's a formal request, you are correct. Go to Gordon. That's number one. Or go to me and I'll go to Gordon. So that's formal request. But if it's just informal, hey, representative, can I get that thing that was handed out in committee? It's up to you. You have it. You can turn it over. It's a public record, right? And so it's fine. You can also say, please go see the committee secretary, because the committee secretary is sort of the committee's custodian of records. And then generally speaking, LAS is the custodian of all records, because that's where the committee secretaries file all the minutes and all the testimony and all the things that go up on the public LI, right, the website. So there is a bit of a deferral you could do. So it's a little tricky because you can make a public records request to any of you, right? Anyone could ask you for, but you're not the custodian. So there are ways you can move that to the proper person. So you can't ignore it necessarily. And generally speaking, if somebody asks you for a document and you're trying to be nice, you'll direct them to where to find it if you don't have it. So, but there is a difference between a formal and an informal request, right?
As always, Mr. Thompson, I appreciate your sage advice and thank you for your patience, Madam Chair.
Do we have any other questions, committee? Representative Osman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was a conversation in a previous committee that I'd like either clarification or confirmation on. If there is an email chain that has gone out with a reply all, or say a new email that goes out to the majority of the committee or all of the committee, that is a violation of COMA. That violation would be to everybody on that email chain, whether an active participant or not.
Madam Chair, arguably yes. And I've seen a couple of the cases where non-active participants were treated the same as active participants, right? So if you see that, generally we cure that pretty quickly, right? If we happen to be on the email chain or the chair happens to notice that email chain, it's generally cured at your next meeting, right? That document is distributed, that conversation is had publicly. And at that point, you've essentially, taken care of most people who would maybe go complain, file a formal complaint with the Attorney General. If you do it repeatedly, I would definitely not advise that, right? But yeah, I think that, and I was kind of hearkening back to the elements of that serial communication, right? It's these communications that involve a majority that share a common topic and are intended by any participant to reach an agreement, right? So if one of you intends to get agreement amongst everybody, I think that kind of pulls all of you in, and that's the danger, is you're bringing along people that, please don't do this, right? And you jeopardize all of you. I think that's a fair way to look at it. And there might be, factual circumstances, but there are others where I think arguably innocent parties, were treated the same and had to go to the same education or had to pay a fine.
Like you have to go to coma school or Cora school or, yeah. Okay, committee, any other questions? So I do have a question about the serial communication. Is it, if it's one, you mentioned one participant, I email Laura and then she emails Lindsay, who emails Lauren, so that's what we're talking about. Like if it was the same topic and we're saying, what do you think about this? What, that kind of thing. If it went to be a majority of the committee, and by the way, we have 17 members, just so you all know that, that 9 would be a majority. But and is there like a time limit? Like what if it was weeks in between or, it just,
Madam Chair, my only note in here, and I'd have to dig into it a little bit to get a specific answer, is that it is a series, not contemporaneous. So I don't know if there's a limit to the time, but the idea is definitely it doesn't happen all at once. So drawing the line between the serial communication, 1 to 1 to 1, or 1 to 2 to 2 more, right, even, versus the reply all, right, which is contemporaneous. That is a good distinction. I probably should have caught that in Representative Osmond's
that's
question.
helpful. Okay, committee, any other questions for Supervisor? Okay, Jason, thank you so much. We
These
appreciate
are
it.
always the toughest committee with this presentation, so try to be prepared. I
We have
hope
a few attorneys.
I hope we helped. And honestly, the main thing to take from this is if you have a question about a CORA or COMA issue, please get in touch with us right away so that we can keep you from making an error, or, we can get Gordon involved and handle it properly. That's probably the biggest takeaway. If you have questions, we are here to help because we know how much you value transparency, and we share that. So we want to help you not violate these acts.
Yeah, thank you so much. Committee, okay, just a couple of business items and then we'll be out of here. Just if, I think maybe the freshmen, you went over this when you had your freshman orientation, but so what happens, someone requests a bill draft for introduction. And so there's an RS number, meaning that there's a draft, it's started. And then once it's finished, once the person who requested is like, okay, I think this is great, this is fine, this is just what I want, it's delivered to the committee chairperson on the floor, and then I turn it in to the clerk in the House. And that's how a bill is introduced. And at that moment, it gets a bill number. And then it's read in to the House. So that's kind of how, and so sometimes there can be a time lag if there's a draft that's still being worked on. So if you have any questions about that, again, our advisors are great about answering. Okay, next order of business, I intend to always have a meeting Monday through Thursday. Fridays, because we're a 3:30 committee, my goal will be to not have meetings on Fridays. But if we get backed up, it might have to happen sometime. We all know we're having this, we all know. That's not happening this year, you're just saying, okay. Okay, anyway, that's my goal, is to not have it, but it could happen because of the condensed time frame that we have. And I was really hoping we were going to get some bill introductions today so that we could then have hearings next week and get some things done. And someone just texted me and said that they got held up and they weren't able to get here for the introduction that they were expecting. So, but we'll get on it. And we'll schedule probably, if we need to, we'll do more than one bill hearing in a day, and we'll get it on it. And the goal is to not have meetings on Fridays. But, okay, then the last thing I think, unless you have more questions, is Lene has done a fabulous job so far, just getting all this together. It's all brand new for her. Now, I like paper. And so when I have a committee hearing, I like to be able to mark up the testimony as I'm hearing it. If you would like paper, you need to let Lene know that you would like paper. And so we do have, if possible, we do have, the accordion folders. If you want an accordion folder with your papers in it, we will accommodate that. We'll do that. But if you want to go paperless and you want to do electronic, that's great too. Whatever y'all want to do. But if you do want paper, you need to let her know. And she might work it out she might make the copies, or she might, talk to your office assistant, and somehow we'll get it figured out where if you want paper. But if you will let Lene know, I guess you all should know her email address. Would you like to, why don't you are they getting emails from you now? Yeah. Okay, so you can just reply to her if you would like paper. No reply all, okay? It's not a policy issue, but okay. Any other questions about the Judiciary Committee or anything else? Yes, of course. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, and I really do appreciate the chair's understanding that good and reputable lawyers try to avoid working on Friday afternoons unless absolutely necessary. But it's always been the practice of the committee, and I think it would be fair for all of us to anticipate that because we oftentimes don't work on Friday, sometimes we are here after 5 o'clock.
Oh, yes.
And that the chair will try to advise us, but just understand, if you want to leave at 5 o'clock, then that means you're going to have to work Friday, and I don't think any of us want that. I think that's been always the policy, and your policy as well,
That's a great point. And we try to get finished at 5, but that does not always happen in this committee. Yeah. Good point. Okay, anything else? Anything else? Staff, anyone have anything? Okay, all right, we're adjourned. Of course, Monday, no one's here. We'll see you all on Tuesday. Thank you.